Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here. We're ready to do our first power rankings. Heading into week 1, week 0 games have been played. Shout out to our sponsor, Steaks. You can see the message below where you can partner with them to have some fun during football season. And Blake, we polled our entire staff. We have come up with our power rankings heading into week 1. So this was a staff vote. It's not just me and you and somebody's opinions dominating. And let's jump right into it. Number 14, the Vanderbilt Commodores, but the gap between 14 and 13 may be a little less than we would have thought a week ago. I know Vanderbilt played a bad Hawaii team, but the Commodores certainly looked a lot better in week 1.
Yeah, they did. And like you said, I think we'll go through these rankings and I'll kind of point out like some of those spots where it's like, because you are getting multiple opinions. Like I said, it's not just you and I or just one individual. It's a good group of people here in terms of putting all these rankings together and getting your composite, ranking heading into week 1. And I thought it would be interesting to see, would Vanderbilt be at 14 for us, like coming out of that first game, or would people maybe drop Missouri behind them? But like you said, I think it's understandable, I think, still to see Vanderbilt probably in the spot, based on the overall rankings that we have, just because, again, a huge win in week 1. But I think now, moving forward, and maybe we don't even get a good gauge of that against Elon, but there's just still a lot, I think, yet to be determined, just coming out of one game against a Hawaii team, as we talked about, that was just as in much of a rebuild mode as any team, out there. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of whether Vandy can kind of climb beyond the spot moving forward.
Missouri at 13, South Carolina at 12. Missouri pretty much a consensus bottom 2 pick. And South Carolina maybe a little more variability. That's the team of the two that I think's got a better chance to rise up the polls. Because frankly, I've got a lot of I could see that season going a couple of different ways. I believe in Shane Beamer, but I want to see them exert a little more dominance than they did a year ago. They were in some close games with some not really good teams. But having said that, I think they're a much better South Carolina team this year.
I was curious to see where South Carolina would fall in polling everyone, because like you said, I think there was some variety. I was looking back at some of the rankings. Like I think someone had them as high as, I want to say like 8 or 9. But again, it's one of those things too, like when you're doing rankings, and I said this to you with one team in particular, and I'll talk about them when we get to them. But like, I was like, I don't know where to put this team. Like, I think they're better than where I put them. Like, I just don't know where else to put them, because I can't put them above this team. I can't put them above this team. And I think that's the case, like for South Carolina, to me, is like, I probably would have expected them to kind of fall to the spot, in polling and putting all the rankings together. I figured they'd be probably in the bottom 4, but am I surprised to see some people thinking they'll be much higher than that? No, because we've talked about it, chance to build off of last season. And I think that they're a team that I think this was probably the bottom 3 that I would have expected in terms of these 3 to be 12 through 14. But I think South Carolina is certainly the one with the most upside. And I'll just tell you, the most surprising of our entire composite rankings here is going to come next, because when I saw this after putting everything together, I was just like, wow. Sorry to this fan base. It's not me. Hey, like we said, this is a bunch of people, and somehow this is where this team landed. So, hey.
Well, and maybe the next 2, Florida at 11.
Yeah.
I mean, and this, I think this sums up the SEC this year. I could see Florida ranking several spots higher than 11. I think I voted Florida several spots higher, but
you did. Yeah.
We have some that aren't believers. And look, you've got the number 11 team in our poll, and it's a 3-point underdog, albeit at home, in week 1 to a team that a lot of people have got picked as a college football playoff participant. I just think that says a lot about the strength of the league, maybe more than it does. Well, I think more than it does about Florida.
Yeah, I had Florida higher too. But like I mentioned, though, with Florida, they're one of those teams that, because they have a new head coach, I can understand some of the hesitation in terms of just not really knowing exactly where you're going to get just yet for them. But I was surprised. Like when I saw this, I was like, are we sure about that? Like, do we add up the numbers right? But then I looked back at like the individual polls. I was like, yeah, man, there's some people that are much lower on Florida, for sure. So I was surprised by this one because look, they could wind up being the team that challenges Georgia in the East. I don't think they're going to eclipse Georgia, but they could be the team that's in the best position. Maybe it's not a couple of those other teams we're going to talk about here in a minute. So, yeah, to see them at this spot, I think this will be when you're looking at rankings, around, media and all this stuff. I think I've seen Florida probably as much of a wide variety as a lot of these other teams. Like I think there's a lot of people that just don't have a great feel from what you're going to see from Florida, and clearly
Mhm.
based on our composite, individual rankings and all that, it looks like there are some other people that certainly have that question about the Gators. So
I think there's going to be more upset fan bases than happy fan bases with our rankings, but that's just
hey,
somebody's
want us
got to
to.
be in every spot, right?
Don't throw your vitriol at just me and Chris, because
Right.
this is more than us here, and we are compiling all the rankings into one. And it's not always a perfect science, let's be honest, but it's just the best way to do it, because otherwise we'd be here for 3 hours going through everyone's individual rankings. So yeah,
Okay. Number 10. This was also a surprise. Ole
yes,
Miss. Because
yeah,
Ole Miss is preseason top 25. I've seen Ole Miss, I don't know, three, well, maybe not three, but 4 or 5 if you look at
yeah,
the national polls, that's where they would place in the SEC.
yeah.
You've got maybe some quarterback uncertainty. You've got a lot of new faces. Matt Corral is gone, who I thought was, after Bryce Young, the best player in the league a year ago. So I think that I can't speak for everybody, but when I did this, I look a little bit more and I lean towards certainty and what we know and what we've seen. And so I think uncertainty is the thing that cost Ole Miss here. But I mean, if Ole Miss wound up in the top 5, am I surprised? No, of course not.
You had Ole Miss higher. I'm looking back at you and I's individual rankings here. I had Ole Miss a little bit higher, not a lot higher, but I had them a little bit higher. Yeah, so it was kind of surprising, but as we said, there was someone that was much lower on Ole Miss than I think you and I were, and that kind of pushed them down the ranking here a little bit. So I think, like you said, it's certainty. You got a lot of transfers coming in. The expectation is that they will be able to get the job done. But like we mentioned, I mean, you've got a new quarterback, you've got a lot of guys that are going to have to be plugged into different spots. And I think that is probably something when you're doing the week one power ranking, you tend to lean on the knowns, right? And we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about that. And that's why one of these teams we'll talk about here in a second, I probably had higher than others just because I feel like there's more knowns with them. But Ole Miss, there's still a lot to be determined. But yes, it wouldn't be surprising at all. You talked about like maybe they're 4 or 5. I wouldn't be shocked if Ole Miss winds up being 3, maybe
Yeah.
behind Alabama and Georgia. So yeah, I don't even want to say it's surprising to see them at 10 because again, it's individual opinions. But I think this is one that I would be more surprised if Ole Miss is the 10th team at the end of the season. So
Okay, this was another surprise. I did not expect Auburn at 9. That's higher than I would have put Auburn based on, again, uncertainty. And the wheel of chaos started last week when Auburn dismissed Allen Green.
yeah, this was another. I thought Auburn and LSU would be the 2 teams, and we can go ahead and say it. LSU's at 8. I thought they would be the 2 teams going through all of the rankings that we compile to see. I had no idea where to place these 2. Like I thought, I just didn't know. And I told you LSU was the team where it was. I think I probably looked at LSU and may have had them lower than I wanted to have them, but I said I think they're better than that. I just don't know where to put them. But I may have been a little higher on Auburn than most people looking at our rankings here, because I think, Chris, to me it's the start, right? We talked about the opportunity for Auburn to start the season off in their schedule, and it's kind of what surprised me about Ole Miss being at 10. Because we said there's a decent chance if things come together, Ole Miss is going to be 6-0. There's a realistic possibility they could be sitting there 5-0, whatever it was. Auburn's got a great chance with all those home games to start off early. So I can't say I'm shocked that Auburn's this high because I think you're looking at the schedule going into it. But again, we are doing this based on this is where things sit heading into week one. And yes, I would have been a little surprised as well to see Auburn at 9, but I don't think it's that far off because, like I said, I think I was higher on Auburn looking at all of our rankings here than maybe others were. And then LSU at 8. I mean, we talked about it in our LSU preview. I don't know, man. I don't know where to put them. And like I said, I just had to put them somewhere, and I think I actually had them lower than 8. But this it's kind of fitting, isn't it? These 4, because Mississippi State's next. We'll go ahead and cat out of the bag on that one. They're at 7. But we did like these four. I said, wow, who knows what order these four are going to finish in? Mississippi State, LSU, Auburn, Ole Miss is the order we have them now. I probably would have thought that Ole Miss would have been higher on that as either the first or second team. But, again, what separates those four teams right now? I couldn't tell you. So maybe it's experience, right? Like maybe that's the thing. And Mississippi State's the most experienced team of that bunch, probably. So maybe that's what I leaned on, and that's why I think they're sitting there at 7. So
before we get to state, a plug for our sponsor, Stakes. We've got some huge games coming up this week. And just to make it a little more fun, we've got an account, Southeastern 14 at Stakes. We've made some predictions in that app. You can find that in the App Store, whatever platform you're on. We want to hear from you guys, whether you agree or disagree with our picks. We have entered picks for games this weekend, straight up and against the spread that I did. So if you want to yell at me. But go to playwithstakes.com/14. Sign up there. Put your predictions in on our questions. Again, it costs you nothing. And you can also, if you go through the app, use the invite code Southeastern14, and you'll get a double welcome bonus. But play along with this year. A lot of fun to play at Stakes. And again, it costs you nothing, and you can win some prizes. Okay, Mississippi State. That is sort of my sleeper team. I don't know how much a sleeper team anybody is in the SEC unless it's maybe Vandy or Missouri, because we expect all these teams to be pretty good. But I go with the known. And State's got a lot of known, Blake. A quarterback who completes like 98% of his passes, a couple of running backs back who catch everything under the sun, receivers back. They lose a left tackle. That's big. But a lot of faces on defense back. I like that team more than our prediction spot here at 7 showed.
No, I look probably the most experienced team of the bunch. And yeah, I was not far off from you in terms of where you had them ranked, and you had them ranked very high. Like I said, we're not going to give away our trade secrets here, but you did. You had them higher than anybody, and I did not have them that high, but I had them probably higher than I would have expected when I first, when I said, okay, we're going to do this, but I probably had them higher than I expected. So, yeah, I mean, I told you it was trying to decide between those 4 teams, and in my own individual rankings, I had Mississippi State ahead of the other 3, and those 4 teams in the West that we talked about. So, yeah, I experienced, like I said, I think that means something, and I think there's a lot to like about this team, and it would not surprise me at all, like you mentioned, if they finish higher than this. But going into week 1, a nice spot to be sitting in, I think, for them.
Okay, I think we're about to tick off an entire fan base with this. I'm almost sure of it. We've got Texas A&M at 6.
I didn't have you this low, Texas A&M
and
fans.
Again, to me, it's a prove it vote, right? And maybe that's but I mean, so many young faces, a sort of new quarterback. The disappointment, I guess, of last year. Again, somebody's got to be in every spot. I want to see more from A&M, and this is where we think they are now. This is how we rank them now. Can A&M move up to 3rd? Absolutely. Who knows? Maybe even 2nd. I think that's a stretch, but we need to see it a little bit first.
One person on our staff was not very high on the Aggies.
No.
And it was not you or I.
No.
But Chris and I had, just for what it's worth, Chris and I, I'm looking at our rankings here. Chris and I did have A&M higher than this, but was not significantly higher than this. But one person did not. One person, I think, with this vote, kind of sent them down a little bit to this spot. But like you said, look, it's not just us saying this, and we're not knocking Texas A&M, but it's the same discussion we've had over the years, and we talked about it. The numbers are what they are. I think you want to see them actually, prove it consistently throughout a season. Yes, they've had the one good season. And again, I don't mean that like they've had the one elite season, right? Like, but the other seasons we talked about, they've lost 4 games or whatever. And, to me, if you're a preseason top 10 team, that to me tells you you're on the borderline of making the college football playoff, which means you're only going to lose a game or 2 at most. And I think that's where, you kind of look at them. Do you believe they can get to that point? Are they at that point yet? And I think that's where some of the questions are with them. And I think you mentioned people just want to see it. And I think that's why I'm not surprised necessarily to see some people more down on them than others, just because, yeah, I think people just want to see how it's going to unfold. And yeah, so I think certainly plenty of upside for A&M, like you said. And in the best case scenario, if Alabama or Georgia falter somewhere, it wouldn't be shocking to see A&M just from a talent standpoint to move up into one of those first couple spots. So
we've got Kentucky at 5, Tennessee at 4. I mean, those two are flip a coin. I could even argue Florida in that group.
Right. That's what we said earlier. I think Florida. Yeah.
But I mean, and look, it's. I think if you go Kentucky ahead of Tennessee, which we did not, it's based on Will Levis on offense. And on the other side, it's based on the fact that Mark Stoops has always had, well, not always. I mean, after he had a couple of years to get it going and get his players, they have been stout on that side. Now, Kentucky's record at times has certainly been propped up by schedule, but throw that aside. He's an outstanding coach, one of the better ones in the country. They've got an identity. Now, you've got some uncertainty. Kentucky loses its best receiver. Chris Rodriguez is suspended for a few games right off the bat. Now, I think Kentucky has got Courvoisier Smoke and some other guys who have been around and I'm not going to say carry the load, but have had experience. Tennessee, I think a lot of that is on Hendon Hooker, who is probably the best player in the league, not named Bryce Young or Will Anderson. And so I think the question with Tennessee is defense. That will probably be always the question with Tennessee as long as Josh Heupel is there. But we've got the Vols at 4 and the Cats at 5.
Listen, somebody on our staff had Kentucky as the third best team, and I think that pushed them up to this spot. I had Tennessee.
Think that's ambitious, but
I do too, and I had Tennessee ahead of Kentucky, but I had them right there together. So I think that's worth noting too, and I think that's where I am surprised to see Kentucky in all of these individual rankings somehow pushing ahead of an A&M, because I just think that I thought for the most part I just would have expected A&M to be higher, but like you said, I think the upside and the potential was clearly there with Kentucky, and there are a lot of people that are buying Kentucky, and I am too. I'm one of those that, like you said, you look at the offense and see the possibilities, and you feel like defensively Mark Stoops is going to have them in a good position. So yeah, I mean, look, we mentioned it. I mean, I think coming into the season, it's just understandable why a lot of people feel like either Tennessee or Kentucky are the team that will finish behind Georgia, and that's not a knock on Florida. It's just I feel like there are coaches in place there that have been there. They've implemented their systems. Obviously, Stoops a lot longer than Heupel at this point, but you just don't know system-wise what you're going to get from Florida yet. I feel like Billy Napier will get it figured out, and they'll be right back up there soon enough, and maybe it is as soon as this year. But I think seeing Tennessee and Kentucky this high, that just shows you kind of the ascent maybe of those two programs, and what, there's a lot of, hype, right? And you hate to use that word. I know Tennessee fans hate to hear that word, but there is a lot of hype surrounding these two teams, and it's just a matter of, look, can they meet those expectations? Because yes, we have them at 4 and 5 in the composite rankings here, and looking back through all the different individual rankings, there was really, for the most part, no one really had Tennessee or Kentucky all that low, which makes sense. They're pretty much were a consensus top 6 for most of these. Yeah, for pretty much both of them. So maybe someone was 7 in there. So yeah, I think, look, it just kind of adds up for these two to be in these spots. So
I have some misgivings about having some West Division teams below these two, but
true.
The poll is the poll, and
right?
I think that the wisdom of the crowd is better than the wisdom of one. So
you did have I'm looking back. You had a couple. We had several West teams ahead of these teams, and I'm looking at mine. I had A&M a bit higher, so that's the only one that does stand out for me. So
okay, number 3, the Arkansas Razorbacks. I think we had something close to a consensus on this one. I just think it's what do you know?
Yeah.
KJ Jefferson to me is probably the most underrated player in the league. Jalen Catalon's back, who they missed most of last year. Bumper Poole is back. They've just got experienced guys They do lose Traylon Burks, but I just think we're believers in Sam Pittman. And the Razorbacks slot at 3.
Yeah, aside from 1 and 2, which again is understandable, right? That's why these are our top 3 teams, but very little variety in where Arkansas was picked from all of our, individual staff rankings here. They were pretty much top 4 for everyone. So yeah, that's why they're sitting here in this number 3 spot. So yeah, I mean, like you said, I think with KJ Jefferson and looking at the potential of what they're going to achieve, and we talked about how big their schedule is, right? And just those first couple of games, I've got to look it back up again. What was it? We've gone through so many schedules, but starting with Cincinnati, South Carolina, those are significant games. If you win both of those games,
not an easy
no,
September.
Not at all. And but we said if you win both those, you build up that momentum. Bobby P's coming back on September the 17th. You got that game against A&M. We talked about, Alabama, you don't play a road game until October the 8th. So that was a big part, I think, for Arkansas. But it is really more about skill to me and just the talent they have at a lot of these skill positions. And so, yes, I expected Arkansas, like I mentioned, to be in our top 5 somewhere. But once we started looking at all the individual rankings, I said, yep, they're going to be the number 3 team. And yeah, just for what it's worth, I had them at 3 on mine. So I think you did too. So yeah.
Georgia 2, Alabama 1. I mean, that was probably the easiest. The top 2 and the bottom 2 were the easiest picks. Everything in between was, God help us. But I mean, Georgia 2, Alabama 1. The last 2 teams standing last year and could be the last 2 teams standing this year, depending on how well Georgia is able to plug in for 15 guys it lost to the NFL draft, which is just.
Yeah. I mean,
Alabama usually has those drafts, and then, Georgia says, hold my beer in that one. It was crazy.
Look, we'll get in our wrestling references later when we do our live stream with Blaine. But as we always say, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Georgia beat the man last year. And right now, Georgia's the man, but I had Alabama number 1. So I technically cheated on the Ric Flair saying there. But I think Alabama right now is better built. And like you said, Georgia has a few more unknowns. Although they're plugging, they're replacing talent with talent. I mean, they're replacing a lot of good players that are going to go on and do the same kind of things probably. So, no brainer here for these to be 1, 2. And I'm not surprised at all that this was the order to have Georgia 1 Alabama 1 and Georgia 2. So,
what's your email again?
Look, there's probably gonna be people demanding our individual lists and
right.
Just
so when people yell, they can do it to you.
Listen, as we said, this is why you and I learned a long time ago. There's no gain in doing that. So that's why we put together. We got all our staff members together and said we want everyone. So this is a composite ranking, just like you did with a composite. We did the previous video looking at all the different publications out there and. So you can kind of, if you want to compare and contrast, you can go back to that video and see kind of Chris put together all the media publications and all that kind of stuff that we used. And you can see kind of what the composite was on that. And it is different than what we had from our individual staff rankings. But yes, I will not be releasing my individual staff rankings aside from the ones that I mentioned. I did have Alabama 1. So there you go. There's all I'll give you. So I had Arkansas 3. I mentioned that too. So.
Well, it's fun to do these things. Don't get too worked up about it if you're listening and you didn't like where your favorite team is, because you know what? If they earn it, they'll get it here. And have some fun with us. Play along with us at Stakes, our sponsor. That's going to be such a cool partnership for this football season. So anyway.
Live stream.
Yes. Tell folks about our live stream. If you're watching this on Wednesday morning. Then you're going to want to see our live show tonight.
So if you want to give your feedback on our rankings, you can do that certainly in the comment section, or you can come into the live chat and, chat away with everyone else. And yes, we're going to do that Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will go over a lot of the week 1 games. So we'll pretty much go through everything, which, we have videos up on all those, but this will kind of be some expanded thoughts on all the big week 1 action on the eve of, week 1 here. With Tennessee and Missouri playing on Thursday night. So we'll all be doing that. So we'll answer your questions, have some fun like we always do in these live streams. If you've subscribed to the channel for a while, Chris and I, we like to have fun in the live stream. So anything you guys want to say, keep it clean. No profanity, please. And yes, we will have a lot of fun on the live stream. So
when is the bag of shame going to make its first appearance this year?
I thought when you had Florida, I thought we had Florida at 11. It may have come in, but the problem is you and I didn't have Florida at 11, so we couldn't put the bag of shame over our heads because we should have found the person who had Florida ranked lower, which we will find that person for you, Florida fans.
We might out that person.
We will bring them in, and we will tell you that they were responsible for Florida having such a low ranking on this composite Southeastern 14 power rankings for week 1. So, yeah.
The bag of shame made its first appearance when yours truly picked the Kentucky Wildcats to be your national champions in basketball.
Adios.
And
round one.
that one crashed and burned.
Yikes.
Quite quickly.
I think I picked them in the Final Four. I think we also, you had Auburn in the Final Four too, I believe, and had to bring that back out again. And they were, so hopefully don't have to bring that out.
There was lots of bag of shame wearing in March.
Yeah. So we'll just guarantee it to you now. If Florida
will screw something up big time.
Listen, if Florida wins the SEC East, we will find that person. We will bring them on this live stream, and you will see. We will have them read off their preseason ranking for 30 minutes straight, just to give you the entertainment of having to go back on that one. So
while wearing the bag of shame.
Yes, correct.
All right.
Goodness, this is going to be a wild season. So
yes, it is. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Remember to visit our sponsor Stakes. And again, if you're seeing this Wednesday morning, we'll see you tonight in the live stream. So be there and have your questions ready. And we look forward to that.